Hello and welcome back to our channel. My name is Femke from Fame to the Fiction on Instagram and Bookish Buddies over on Twitter. And today I am here with my most disappointing books of 2020. So before we get into the video, I just wanted to apologize for the horrid lighting. It's winter where I live, days are really short, and in addition to that, days are often very cloudy. Unfortunately, I do not have a ring light or anything similar. I am looking at one, but haven't been able to get one, so I apologize, but it's going to have to do. So I also wanted to put in a quick disclaimer. This is my most disappointing books video, but that does not mean that I hated these books. Most of these books I actually gave, I think, 3 stars, so that's still fine. I liked them, but I just expected more of them, so that's why they made this list. I have 5 books to get through, so let's get into it. Okay, so I have, I think, quite a few popular books on here, so let's pray y'all don't come for me with pitchforks and everything. But the first book on this list is Children of Blood and Bone by Chomi Adeyemi. Now, this is a prime example of what I meant when I said that I didn't necessarily find these books bad. They didn't live up to the hype for me. This book was very much hyped, and I just expected more. I really liked, I think, the first 2/3 of the book. I liked how action-packed it was. I didn't necessarily really like Zaylee, but I could definitely see where she was coming from. I think the problems that are addressed in this book, such as racism, are obviously very important topics to be discussed, and I really appreciate the book for what it did in that sense. But just after the first, 2/3, like for the last third of the book just lost my interest, I guess. After the first 2/3, I felt that like the story arc for this book was done, and then suddenly it just kept going for another little bit, and I found that really confusing. And because I was almost convinced that the book was finished after that first 2/3, I just found it really hard to get back into the story. And I realized that's really nonsensical, but I just really felt that way, and that's just the way I feel, and I don't really know how to articulate it differently. So yeah, that is the most important reason I think I was disappointed in this book, because it just lost some of its momentum, I guess. Plus, it did suffer a little bit from predictability in my opinion, but I still gave this book 3 stars because I really did like the first 2/3 of the book, and I like the magic system. So the next book on this list is another very beloved YA book, and that is Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman. Esmay had read both Scythe and Thunderhead way before I did, and she loved them. She was super enthusiastic about the books. I think she read both of them in a couple of days, and the third one hadn't come out yet at that point. And she was like, yeah, you have to read this too. So I did. I read Scythe last December, I think, and I think it also made it on my list of most disappointing books from last year. I'm not sure, to be honest. But like I said, it was very much a hyped book, and it just didn't live up to that hype for me. And I felt the exact same about Thunderhead. I was bored, I think, for 90% of this book. I didn't really connect to the characters. It almost felt clinical to read. I was reading everything and I was like, okay, sure. But for the first 90% or so, again, I thought it was very predictable. The last 10% did surprise me. The last 10% saved the book for me, because I'm pretty sure I would have given it 2 stars if not for that last 10%. That last 10% couldn't really make up the rest of the book for me. Like I said, I couldn't connect to the characters. I was bored most of the time reading it because I found it predictable. So unfortunately, Thunderhead is on this list. I will be reading Toll because I didn't hate the series enough to not want to finish it. I am curious to see how it ends, especially after the ending of this book. But I mean, if I do read the Toll next year, the way I'm looking at it now, I really do think you could expect it to be on my most disappointing books of 2020 list for next year. Then the next book on this list is another one I was personally very excited for and just didn't really do it for me. And that's Girl Serpentthorne by Melissa Bashir-Dust. So I got this book in a Fairy Loot box, and when I read the synopsis of the book, I was very, very intrigued. The premise sounds absolutely wonderful. It's basically set in like Persia, or at least a Persian-inspired fantasy world. And I just love that setting. I just love reading about it. And I think that was my favorite thing about this book, which is the setting. I just felt like this book was rushed. I think it's only 300 pages or so. Yeah, 322. And it could have definitely benefited, I think, from, you know, some extra pages. At least for me, it would have made it better for me, obviously. I think I would have enjoyed the extra description of feelings, places, that kind of thing. I did like the plot. I wasn't super impressed by it. It was a bit predictable, again. But it wasn't too bad. I enjoyed the plot. But one of the most disappointing things for me personally was the romance. And not even the fact that it was female-female, because I don't care about that. But I just didn't feel the chemistry between the two love interests. Plus, it was too rushed, I think. In my opinion, the main character had much better chemistry with the villain. And I am kind of sad that it didn't go that way. I really would have liked this book, I think, if this would have been like a corruption arc. So instead of like a redemption arc, it's just the main character that turned bad. So yeah, I think I would have liked it a lot better then. But as it is now, there were just a couple too many things that just... I don't want to say they were bad, because they weren't, but they weren't for me. I would have liked it a lot more if those things had been different. The next book on this list is The Lives of Saints by Leigh Bardugo. Obviously, first off, I know this is like an extra novella kind of thing, but I think, personally, again, for me, I would have enjoyed this book more had there been fewer stories and had the stories been longer. Right now the stories are very short. I think most of them are only like a page or two, maybe 3. Because right now they just felt very superficial. There was really not a lot of depth to the stories. It was like an omniscient third-person narrator, I think. And it just made it feel really flat. I mean, like I said before, it just almost felt clinical, like we were told what happened and that's just really about it. Not much else. I also would have liked it a lot more had there been more connections to the stories we already know. So Shadow and Bone, Six of Crows, and King of Scars. There were a couple of Easter eggs, but if you just read this one and not any of the other ones, you won't notice them, so they're not spoilers. But yeah, overall, like I said, I would have liked it a lot more had there been fewer but longer stories. And the final book on this list is also probably the book I was most disappointed in, and that is The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. This is also the only book on this list I gave 2 stars. I am super well, not even conflicted, just sad, disappointed. I wanted to love this book, but I just didn't. I had a couple of issues with it. First up, just again really a preference thing. This book didn't just switch between point of views, but it also switched between like writing styles. So the one point of view would be first person present and the other one would be third person past tense. And it really bothered me. There were also a couple of points of views that I really don't think were necessary. They just, Yeah, well, they added a little bit of, like, maybe a little bit of extra mystery, but I think we could have done fine without them, to be honest. In addition to that, I also think, well, it's a personal dislike. I would have loved this book a lot more had it just been vampires. This book suddenly introduced a whole bunch of other, you know, mythological beings that added many different layers of complexity, and I just don't think it was necessary, and I think it just overcomplicates things to the point that this book just won't and can't tell you everything you need to know in the length that it is. So I'm really sad about that. I am just a little bit curious about how the series will continue, because I know it's at least going to be a trilogy, but I believe it was also going to be like more than 3 books, but I honestly have no clue and I can't find it anywhere. So yeah, too bad. Okay, so those were my most disappointing books of 2020. If you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts down below. If you liked this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and hitting the subscribe button if you want to. I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!